Father-in-law won't allow our daughter's live-in boyfriend in his house, derailing Christmas. How do I explain this to them? This is a long drama-filled tale, so buckle in. Our daughter and her boyfriend, let's call him Dan, moved in together in August. It was fast, they'd only been together for 6 months, but they're old enough to make that decision and are discussing marriage. I fully believe they're going to end up together. Dan had to move away for training this month, so they're going to be long distance for a little while, but they plan to live together as soon as they're in the same city again. Now, my father-in-law can be a lot. He's your typical rich old white guy who's used to getting his way. He and my mother-in-law visited my daughter in November, and for some reason, my father-in-law took an unreasonable dislike to Dan. No reason was given, he just doesn't like him. Personally, I think it may be because they moved in together so quickly, and or because Dan is a person of color and our family is white, but my father-in-law would never admit it. So, here's where it gets sticky. Dan will be spending Christmas with our immediate family at our house. His parents will be away and he was going to be alone, so of course we invited him to stay with us. As far as we're concerned, he's gonna be family and we treat him as such. Now, my in-laws live about 2 hours away. Typically, we would do an overnight visit at their house for the holidays, and we're planning one where we invited Dan to stay with us. My partner was on the phone with his dad ironing out details and he told his father about Dan staying with us. My partner was very careful to say he understood that it was his parents' decision whether they wanted to include Dan or not. It honestly never occurred to me that they'd leave him out. And my father-in-law had a hissy fit. He said he didn't want that boy, he's 24, in our house. Didn't discuss it with his wife, who loves Dan, and just flat out refused to include him. My partner, and I'm so proud of him for this, told his dad that Dan would be staying with us in part of our holiday plans. He agreed that of course his dad has a right to decide who to have in his home, and he wasn't going to push. He suggested his parents could talk about it separately, like not on the phone with him, before making any final decisions. Then he suggested if father-in-law truly didn't want Dan in his house, we could all meet for lunch or dinner halfway between them, all including Dan. But that did not go over well. My father-in-law immediately became defensive and snapped about how it was his house and his choice, and he didn't need to talk to his wife. His word was final. Uh-huh, he's that guy. The hilarious part to me is my in-laws are devout Christians. So much for the season of love and acceptance, right? Anyways, my dilemma is how to address this without our daughter and Dan. I'm furious and disgusted with my father-in-law's behavior, and if it were up to me, I'd tell her exactly what her grandfather said, and that he told us Dan isn't welcome. But my partner says he'd rather just tell our daughter the overnight visit didn't work out, so she doesn't get mad at her grandparents. I disagree. I think she should know the truth and get mad if she wants to. I know I am. So my question is this. How would you address it with your daughter? Personally, I don't care if she gets angry because of the truth, but these aren't my parents and I want to respect my partner as well. What would you do? Edit. Holy crap, this got bigger than expected. I'm reading every comment and will respond as much as I can. Thank you. Edit 2, for clarity, my partner and I are married. I just tend to call them my partner instead of husband. Also, I should add that my father-in-law does refer to my brother-in-law as that boy, and my brother-in-law is white. That's part of why I'm not sure if father-in-law's dislike of Dan is race-related. Commenter. Please do not insist that your daughter and Dan attend this lunch. Let your daughter know that just what her grandfather said. She can then decide whether she wants to continue a relationship with him or not. She may not want to subject the man she loves to an uncomfortable, at best, lunch with an unapologetic racist grandfather, or not. I can tell you that my children would be done with any relative that spewed such hatred, as would I. Yeah, I mean, you just tell them as it is. You go, hey, your your grandfather said this, and he doesn't want you in their house. I can't do anything about it. So that's just what the situation is. Like, that's what you have to tell them. Because at the end of the day, if they're old enough to live together by themselves, they're definitely old enough to hear some news that someone doesn't like them for one reason or another, you know? Like, does it suck? Yes, 1,000,000%. This whole fucking situation sucks, and your father-in-law is being a shitty person. Can you do anything about it? No. You already tried talking to him. He's not gonna budge. So just tell him straight out, man. Don't lie, don't sugarcoat it. Just be completely honest with them. Update 1. On to the update. I've gotten a lot more responses to my first post than I expected, so I thought I should make an update. Since my original post, I've had several conversations with my husband, none of which have gone well. I've explained I'm not comfortable with the lie of omission, only telling our daughter the date didn't work out, and feel she should be told to ask her grandfather why we won't be going. My husband still disagrees. He maintains that he's protecting her. I'm still arguing that he's protecting his father and therefore rewarding his behavior. He argues that my in-laws missing our overnight visit is the consequence. I finally told him I won't be lying to our daughter. If she asks me why we aren't going, I'm gonna tell her she needs to talk to her grandfather about that. He can explain his decision to her. While I want to simply tell her father-in-law said Dan isn't welcome, I'm not doing his dirty work for him. Frankly, I'm gonna make sure she asks me because I'm not okay with her and Dan attending a lunch with someone who doesn't approve of Dan. It doesn't matter what my father in law's reasoning is, she has a right to know, and he has a responsibility to tell her himself. She can then make an informed decision about whether they want to attend. And even more honestly, if they don't go, I don't go. She needs to know I back her unreservedly. Right now, things at home are icy between my husband and I have no idea how this will turn out. I'll update again once there's more information. Edit. I had to take a break from replying to say thank you again. I really appreciate all the responses, both the supportive ones, thanks guys, it's very validating, and the not so supportive ones. People have given me a lot of different perspectives and some stuff to think about. I'll update soon. So, I want to preface this by saying I am definitely on team you should tell her, but I don't like the way the OP is going about it. So, it's kind of weird how to explain this, but I'll try to do my best. She's telling her husband, I won't say anything unless she asks. But she's going behind her husband's back to set up a situation in which her daughter has to ask her, basically. Is kind of what she said, or is kind of what I'm getting from this post. And I don't like that, right? Like, if your word says I'm only going to ask her if she asks me, you don't set up the situation so that she asks you, okay? That's not okay. Because that is basically not like manipulative behavior, but like you're kind of lying to your husband, right? If you really want to tell her that badly, you tell your husband flat out, I'm telling her, no matter what. And if he's not okay with that, too bad. You told him you're going to do it. If he is okay with it, great. There's no issue, right? That's the only thing I have, like the only issue with this story right now. But let's get into update 2 because I believe she is going to tell her daughter the truth, which is good. Also, I have no idea if this makes any sense or if it really matters. It's just to me, it kind of feels like a way to beat around the bush more or less and get what you want without accepting like the consequences of your actions or something. I'm not really sure where I'm going with this. Maybe it makes sense, maybe it doesn't. Anyways, let's just get into the update. Update 2. Well, here we go again. I haven't had a chance to talk to my daughter yet. We were supposed to chat yesterday, but we weren't able to, so that conversation is on hold. I did, however, talk to my husband again. We got a lot deeper into his thinking on what's happening, and I have to say I was surprised. He's more upset than I thought he was about the situation. He was very angry at his father. The fact that my father-in-law apparently rejected Dan for no good reason infuriates him. He confirmed he, my husband himself, likes Dan and didn't understand why his father was acting this way, so no, my husband doesn't share his father's views. My husband talked about how it's been hard all his life to have to be the mediator in his family. As many suspected, this is a role he's played for a long time. It's always been his job to pat things down between his parents, between his siblings and parents, even between his parents and I. My husband's family is extremely conflict avoidant, and somehow he took on the responsibility for keeping it to a minimum between family members. He hates it, but he says he feels stuck. I knew this about them, but didn't realize just how bad it was. So we talked about it, and I think both of us felt better afterwards, but that's not the real update. Apparently, after our last conversation, he did talk to his dad again. I know a bunch of you are waiting in the wings to scream, father-in-law's a racist, and I'm sorry to disappoint, but that isn't the problem. And no, Dan, our daughter's boyfriend, isn't a con man and didn't say anything unforgivable. My father-in-law is just a grumpy old man who thinks young people shouldn't be living in sin. That's a direct quote. Now, before anyone suggests my father-in-law is lying, because I thought that too, my husband did ask his dad directly if the fact is that Dan is a person of color has anything to do with father-in-law's dislike. When I suggested this as a possibility to my husband, he didn't think so but wasn't 100% sure. Well, apparently my father-in-law was horrified. He asked my husband if he'd said or done anything to give us or Dan that idea. And when we talked about it after the conversation yesterday, frankly, neither of us could come up with anything specific other than the boy comment that father-in-law didn't want that boy to come for Christmas. As I said in my other posts, that was my suspicion and I take full responsibility for it. In my head, I put too much emphasis on father-in-law calling Dan that boy, assuming it was racist. As I said in both my other posts, my father-in-law refers to my white brother-in-law as that boy as well, so I'm the one who added the meaning, and I'm the one who suggested it to my husband. I feel awful, and I apologize if I misled anyone, which she definitely did. That was never my intention. I recently did think my father-in-law could be a bigot. I'm ashamed, to be honest, because it was one stupid sentence in almost 30 years of knowing him. I made a mistake and I've apologized to my husband, and yes, I'll of course apologize to my father-in-law. While they were talking, my father-in-law actually offered to speak directly to Dan and our daughters if they thought this, and my husband explained that no, we were the ones who suspected his issue could be racially motivated. His dad is, understandably, angry that we could think that of him, and I have to do damage control. I'll be calling my father-in-law today to apologize for that and talk about what's happening. But back to the reason father-in-law doesn't want Dan in his house for Christmas. He doesn't approve of Dan and our daughter living together. He says they're too young, it was too fast, and since they aren't even engaged, it isn't appropriate. As I've said before, my in-laws are devout Christians, so the living in sin aspect is very real to them. I swear the man is still living in the 60s, but that's his main issue. As an extension of that, he thinks they moved in together too quickly. I can see why he'd think that. They only dated for 6 months before. But they've been together for a year now and are talking about marriage. My daughter says it will happen. They're just waiting until they're both finished their training, both already have degrees, this is professional training, to make it official. My father-in-law didn't know that. In addition, my father-in-law was under the impression that Dan had been freeloading off our daughter because when my in-laws visited them, Dan didn't have a job. Well, Dan was paying his own way with his savings while he waited for his full-time vocational training to start. Dan's actually moved for that, so he and our daughter will be long distance until he starts his very secure full-time job. Father-in-law didn't know that either. So, does he approve of Dan now? No. He's still got to stick up his nether regions that they were living together before marriage. Is he now willing to host Dan for the overnight visit? Also no. He still disapproves of their choice. Is he a racist jerk? Also no. Just an old-fashioned 80-year-old who doesn't understand that the world has changed. That's where we stand. We still aren't going to the in-laws for Christmas. Dan still isn't welcome at my in-laws' house, but now we know why. And what are we going to say to our daughter? The truth. That her grandfather isn't comfortable having Dan stay overnight when they aren't engaged. That it's his house and we have to respect that. That we're going to try to meet for lunch instead, and she and Dan are welcome to join us, and we'll let them decide. I'll be suggesting she talk to her grandfather directly. Well, I don't know how to feel about this. I mean, I guess people are really like this in real life. I never thought that people could have their religion influence them this much on something so seemingly trivial to me, right? Like, oh, they're living together. Oh no. Like, what if what if they just got like fake engaged or something? And they just faked it with like a fake ring and stuff. That would be kind of funny. And then they got invited. But I mean, I don't know how to feel. I guess it's okay. I mean, we got one more update, so let's just get right into it. Final update. First, the conversation with my father-in-law. It was short and mostly cordial. I apologized for assuming his boy comment meant he had an issue with a person of color dating his granddaughter. I explained that the term is often considered a slur against people of color, hence my reaction. He grudgingly accepted my apology, but he pointed out that's what he calls my brother-in-law too, which he incidentally is white, and he didn't think it meant anything other than a male younger than himself. As a few people suggested, I pointed out that even if he didn't intend it to be an insult, it still was one. He sounded surprised and asked if I thought my brother-in-law was offended when he called him that. I asked if he'd ever called brother-in-law that to his face, and he went very quiet. So I pointed out that if he, brother-in-law, didn't think it was an insult, why didn't he openly call brother-in-law that? He sort of harumphed and muttered something about how people are too sensitive, but I'm pretty sure he got the point. We moved on. I then asked if Dan was welcome in our house at all or just not overnight. That really seemed to surprise him because he said of course Dan could visit, just not sleep over, so that was a relief. He then said that we jumped to suggesting a lunch so quickly he didn't have a chance to suggest we just visit for the day. Talk about miscommunication. So the call ended with us agreeing that this year meeting in a neutral restaurant was for the best and we'd plan better for next year. If Dan's still around, he felt the need to add, but he ended the call by saying he missed us and was looking forward to lunch, so it's all good there. Then the talk with our daughter. She brought up the visit herself and asked when we were going to her grandparents'. Her dad and I had agreed on our response, which was we were going to meet halfway for lunch instead. She was disappointed and asked why. As gently as possible, I told her not everyone is comfortable with having someone they don't know very well staying in their home. Before I could say anything else about my father-in-law's reaction, she made me laugh by asking if Grandpa still had a stick up his ass about her and Dan living together. Everyone who said she already knew was spot on. Then we had a bit of a giggle about old-fashioned values and how not everyone thinks the way we do. We talked about how people react when a relationship moves so fast. Her father's and mine did too. And that attitude changes in time and that Grandpa just didn't know Dan yet. I let her know I wasn't invited to sleep over until her dad and I were engaged either, and that really helped. She laughed and said at least her grandfather's consistent. Then I reminded her that her dad and I support her and them 100%, and she said she knew that. And that was about it. I'm sure some people will be disappointed that there wasn't a big explosive confrontation where we cut father-in-law out of our lives because he's a secret member of a white supremacist group. But that's not just what happened. There was a misunderstanding, a miscommunication, and some judgmental attitudes from both my father-in-law and I. But we're still going to see my in-laws, and Dan will be coming. It just won't be overnight. And things are okay with us and our daughter, and with us and our father-in-laws. As to father-in-law's relationship with our daughter, we're leaving it to them. This will be the final update because the issue is basically resolved. Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night. Now, I'm not really religious or anything like that, but is this something that's just like completely normal for people to just be like, "Yeah, you can come to my house, but you cannot sleep over." Like that's where I draw the line. Like I swear I'm missing something here because there's no way that he's like, "Oh yeah, 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 you can come over. I really like you, but sleeping at my house, I can't do that one. I'm gonna have to cut my visit with you guys short because I'm just not okay with you sleeping in my home. But you can stay here as long as you want. You can stay here for a full 24 hours, but if you fall asleep on my couch, dude, you're getting the boot. Okay? I don't want to see you anymore after that." Like, I don't know. Like, I don't really get it, but that's okay. I'm just kind of trying to make a joke, I guess. I don't know. Probably didn't land very well. Probably wasn't very funny. But that's all for this story. I'm still very confused. Like I've said about 18,000 times. But let me know what you all think in the comments below, and I will see you all tomorrow. Goodbye.